We've buried such things as fishing poles and bowling balls, and this family has asked us to put a teddy bear and a letter and a picture that was drawn by one of the family.
Please sign the register. Hello. A lot of times people might say, well, I don't know what to say, I haven't seen them for a long time. And what I say to them is just the fact that you're here is important, and whatever you say is right.
I don't want to do anything. I don't even want to rearrange the bedroom or shoes out. No. The way it is. I don't know, it just seems like it's
It'll happen, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't push it. Just let it happen its own good time. You know, you'll finally say, all right, I got to do this.
Yeah, and you'll know when it's time.
You'll know when it's time to do that.
Thank you. You guys are great.
On occasion, it does get to be an emotional job, and you just have to swallow a couple times and keep doing.
We gather in the name of the Creator, the Christ.
It just started, just seconds ago.
If you just want to pull around, there's an entrance to the driveway down the back there. I'll give you one of them little orange
When we're ready to leave, now I'll give you a signal. This is the first, this will be the lead car.
When we're ready to pull out, I want you to stop them in both directions.
Bob, that guy that was up on the porch, he's going to take a limo around and put it in
then
the
once
back
we're out,
lot.
you're done. That's all there is to
Give
it.
him an orange sticker, would you? Okay. I'm lowering the bed of the casket down into the bottom of the casket so that when we're ready to close the casket, the lid will not hit any of the things that we've put into the casket. This turns a latching mechanism, which will actually bring the lid down very securely onto the base. There are two caps at this end of the casket. The rear cap opens and has a memorial scroll which has her name and some of her background and her family information in it. Just place the casket on the rollers at the end of the coach and pass it in one to the next. That's fine. You can step back in with your families. When we get to the cemetery, step right up behind the coach again. All right?
The dead represent our own individual past. They are our parents, our relatives, our grandparents, our family. And we want to honor that past because they brought us into the world.
If you're not planning on having your cremated remains scattered somewhere, you have two options for final disposition: earth burial or entombment. Wealthy Americans popularized the private mausoleums in the early 19th century and still use them today. The community mausoleum was developed in the late 19th century to allow middle-class Americans the opportunity to be entombed. The garden crypt is a 20th century adaptation, saving the cost of building, heating, and maintaining a mausoleum.
Colonial Americans saw the cemetery, the burial place, as an educational tool. You who will pass by, not forget that you will soon be here kind of stuff. 19th century Americans embraced the cemetery, not only as a landscape, but as a place. They spent a lot of time in them. I mean, it was very typical to go to the cemetery early Sunday morning and spend the whole day. 20th century Americans have really distanced themselves. They've let their doctors care for their dying, they've let their funeral directors care for their dead, and they've let the cemeterians care for their interred.
Early American families buried their own dead in individual graves somewhere on their land. This grew into community cemeteries and church graveyards.
And then in 1831, outside of Boston in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Mount Auburn Cemetery is established by Jacob Bigelow and a group of Bostonian elites. A revolution is the only way it can be described. All earlier cemeteries in America are very small, less than an acre, very plain looking, very monumented, very, very stark. Mount Auburn is a lush, romantic landscape filled with three-dimensional statuary and absolutely startling vistas.
The Victorians were saying, let's have some vegetation, trees, nature. Nature is a healing element. You've suffered a loss, you're going to bury your loved one. You want to do that in a place of beauty that you can return to and visit with pleasure, albeit melancholy. And there was a real desire to stop moving people around. As cities developed, they dug up the old graveyards and would move people, and people were tired of that. They wanted a place, they wanted eternal rest.
They mark their resting places with lavish monuments, symbolizing their accomplishments and memorializing their family's life on Earth.
When this cemetery was started, families, of course, remained in the community much longer than they do today. The lots were larger because you could imagine buying a lot and having your immediate family and your grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. Today, if you come in and buy a spot, you're less likely to think that your grandchildren are going to be living in the same community, which is a shame.
The next major change, though, comes in 1917. Here at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, a failed suburban housing development, Hubert Eaton reestablishes or recreates the modern American cemetery. First, he eliminates the family monument. This opens the landscape. Second, he places into this newly opened landscape a set of carefully constructed social values, iconographically, features, as he called them, throughout the grounds. These features reflected his central moral values of Christianity, family, and country. Virtually every burial place that has been established in the United States since Hubert Eaton's revolution has emulated Forest Lawn Memorial Park.
I think our whole American attitude is to keep it simple, just sort of throw me away when you're done with me kind of approach. That doesn't take into account the feelings of the survivors or this sense of genealogy and history of a family that you can trace from place to place. I honestly don't know what in 50 years we're going to do with cemeteries. I think that if they can have beautiful trees and flowers and be a place that the living want to come, then I think that's a very valid use of diminishing open space in urban areas. The people who have bought space here have in effect endowed a wonderful park that will be used forever.
The purpose of the vault was partially incorporated originally in the casket. The casket was to keep grave robbers away, because during the early times in the United States, when they were looking for anatomical material for study, you just couldn't get a body for a gross laboratory. So grave robbers went out and got those bodies in order to provide to the medical institutions. Well, the casket did not provide the greatest protection, and so the vault came along. And so the vault provided added protection, not only as far as the grave robbing is concerned, but also for the casketed body as far as the elements are concerned. One of the interesting things about those days is that there were people who were afraid of being buried alive. And so what they did is there were some manufacturers of caskets who put a life-saving device on the casket. In other words, the casket would be in the ground, and above the ground was a bell with a string that went down into the casket, so that if the man or woman was buried alive, she could ring the bell and attract attention to let them come in and disinter her or disinter him because they were alive.
Okay, we're about ready.
In years past, most of your co-workers and neighbors would take part in the procession to the cemetery. Now, bereavement is only an excused absence for immediate family members.
This back step. That's fine. Now follow that gentleman. Watch your step. Walk right along the platforms on either side of the grave. All right, you may lower the casket. And you can step back with your families. Thank you very much.
By the age of 17, the average child has seen 17,000 deaths on television, yet has never been to a real-life funeral.
After the family has left, I'm basically just here as a supervisor to make sure that everything is done properly.
When the lid of the vault goes on, that's not the end of the funeral process. The grieving process really is just beginning. Our relationship, the emotional bond at whatever level that was, is still there, and that it wasn't just a job. And when we see them at the grocery store, we see them the next time there's a death, it still exists, and it just builds upon that bond.